All these events and information is on our website, nativeplants.org. Great name, easy to find. We have a Facebook page. You can become a member. You can just make a donation. We appreciate all of that. Now we get on to our program today. It's my pleasure to introduce Suzanne Tabert from the Cedar Mountain Herb School here in Sandpoint, talking about wild medicinal plants in North Idaho. A little bit about Suzanne. She's a bioregional herbalist, author, speaker, director of herbal education, and adjunct professor at Bastyr University. Her passion is taking students in wild places and sharing tools to engage and connect with flora, fauna, and the exquisite beauty of nature. Suzanne has been inspiring students with joy and excitement for all natural living for over 35 years, offering an amazing platform for folks all over the world to connect with each other and with nature. Please welcome Suzanne Tabert.
Thank you. All right, a little housekeeping here. I've got to make that go away. Make this a bit bigger. So I'm so thrilled. Yes. Can you hear? I think it's more of a function of getting this closer. How is that? Good. And hopefully everybody online can hear me as well. I'm not used to using this thing. I've got a pretty big presence with a pretty large voice. So I have to use this. Is a little intimidating, I have to say. So as Preston has said, I've been teaching herbal medicine for over 35 years. And I absolutely love what I do for a living. And to be able to take people out in nature and show them all the beauty that's around. And oftentimes when we're hiking or just out strolling with our dogs, we see a big green blur, don't we? So what my job and my passion is to identify each individual plant and have you then become part of the community that's out there. So you're not just an observer, you're not just a participant, but you're really truly part of the family of all the plants and all the animals that grow out there. I have one-day herbal workshops all year round, and all both in the garden and in the wild. My next one that's coming up is next month. I'm going to be leading a wild plant intensive on willow, and I'll be taking people up the Clark Fork River. So if you go on my website, cedarmountainherbs.com, you will be able to see all my offerings. I also have 2 apprenticeship programs. One is a weekend program that is the last Saturday and Sunday of the month, starting this month, April through September. So you're with me 2 days. You go home at night because my house isn't big enough to keep you all. And we go out in the middle of nowhere to learn about the wild plants. And you're also on my farmlet, which is in town down by the Catholic Church. We have about 4 acres, and I have chickens and geese and a bunch of cats running around, and very extensive veggie garden and herb garden. And we're putting in a new orchard this year as well. Next Saturday, I'm going to be having my own plant sale. So we moved my garden from one section to another. We had a 5,000 square foot garden that consisted of both herbs and veggies. My husband is from Germany, and he's very much rose. And he married a hippie who was very much however the plants want to grow. And one day he put his foot down. He said, I can't do this anymore. So instead of getting a divorce, we decided to, instead of splitting us, we split the garden. So I have my own garden. He built me a bunch of raised beds, which all my plants didn't fit in there. So that will benefit you all. So, well, not just herbs, lots and lots of herbs, but I'll have peppers and tomatoes and some other, maybe some artichokes as well, because he's doing all of the plant starts. So it's next Saturday from 9 to noon. And I am at the T-Bone of Ontario in Lincoln, 1903. It's a little square burgundy and gray house, and you just pull in and go to where you can hear the geese being really loud, because that's where the garden is, and the plant cell will be too.
You have your website. Do you have a
Nope. It's all a surprise. It's a mystery that will be revealed if you come. But I'll have mugwort, Artemisia vulgaris, motherwort, Leonoris cardiaca. I'll have my Aunt Mary's spearmint. My Aunt Mary gave me her spearmint plant a little start when I was about 11. And let's just say I'm a little bit older than that now. The rootstock is over 80 years old. I'm not 80, I'm 64. But it's a plant that I've taken everywhere I go, and either in pots and in the ground. And I have spread out her legacy of really seeing the beauty part of life. She was one of my original teachers when I was just a wee lass, and she would teach me about how to take care of plants, and how her mom, who was my great grandma, would use herbs as medicine. And so it was really her that started me on this path. So I'll have some of her spearmint, I'll have chocolate mint, peppermint, I'll have Valeriana officinalis, I will have a horseradish, and whatever else my husband will dig up from the garden for me. 1903 Ontario Street. And they're all going to be gallon and 2 gallons, and it's going to go pretty cheap. It's not like what you're going to pay at, the big box stores. So I just want them to be loved. I want them to find a good home. 9 to noon. So what I want to talk about today is pioneer and invasive plants. Oftentimes what we hear about as invasive plants is rip them out of your yard, burn them, poison them, give them to your goats, do whatever you can to get them out of your yard. For the most part, I have a different perspective, an herbalist perspective. And so I am hoping then that you will be able to maybe having a light shed on their attributes, maybe you'll see some of these plants and that you'll want to keep or at least utilize. So oftentimes the plants in North Idaho that are deemed invasive are for good reason, because they just want to take over. And sometimes some of the plants will take over because they're allelopathic. And what that means is they'll put out chemicals that will stop other seeds from germinating, or will just kill the root system of another plant. So, and then that way they're striving for world domination is what they're trying to do, and it can work pretty well. So, so again, as we go forward, you'll see maybe some of them you still want to get rid of, and some of them maybe you'll want to keep. Now, pioneer plants, they come to an area that has been laid barren after some sort of devastation, okay? And so that could be a landslide, that could be floods, fires, avalanches, construction of homes, roads, and bridges. These are the plants that first come back. And generally speaking, these plants are hardy to withstand a harsher environment in an open environment. So if all of the plants have been washed away in a flood or a landslide, the ground, or a fire, the ground is laid barren, right? And so there's not a lot of little hidey places where maybe a more tender plant can seek out some warmth, right? So these plants have to be very, very hardy. They're fast growing. They're there to come back and heal up this area. They're predominantly wind-pollinated flowers due to the lack of pollinators, because there's just not anything there to really attract a pollinator to come. So they need to find another way to join forces to make more of themselves. And they tend to produce copious amounts of easily dispersed seeds. Now this picture is up on Clark Fork. So their devastation areas up there are due to fire and also to deforestation, because of tree cutting. So the role of pioneer plants, soil stabilization. So those root systems go in and they start spreading, and they just hold the ground where it's supposed to be. They aid in the fertilization of soil. Like some of these plants, like the alder, which we'll see in a bit, it contains little bacteria that come up to the roots of the plant, and the plant says, what are you doing here? And the bacteria says, I need a house, I need some place to live. And the plant says, what do you got? And the bacteria says, food. So they decide to join forces. And what happened was the bacteria gather the nitrogen that falls on the from the rain drops coming down into the soil, and they fix this nitrogen in a way that the alder can use. And the alder kind of likes to keep a nice figure, so it doesn't eat all the nitrogen. It says, well, why don't you just disperse some of the nitrogen out? And it does that, and then that becomes more fertile, right? The soil becomes more fertile, and that invites other plants to be able to not just survive, but thrive there. And then, you know, these pioneer plants then, through their ability to stabilize the soil, to bring fertility, bring in pollinators, then it gives rise to the other maybe bigger plants, such as the conifers. So we'll be talking about some of these pioneer plants. Fireweed is one of my first ones. Oh goodness, let's see if I can get that to go. Look at how beautiful that is. This is one of my Bastyr students over in Western Washington. I love teaching them about the fireweed in August, because when we kind of play it like a cello, the seed pods open up, and it's all these, it's like fairies are flying everywhere. And it's just so beautiful watching that and watching their faces as they're just experiencing this amazing thing. Fireweed, just its name itself tells you that it's one of the first plants to come back after a fire, but also it comes back after any kind of devastation too, construction and flooding and that sort of thing. So it is one of the first pioneer plants to arrive on the scene. It's used traditionally to cool down fevers, hot flashes. Can I hear an amen, my sisters? And then burns as well. It contains mucilage in the internal stems and in the leaves. And I know one of my apprentices is here, and I see a couple online as well. They had an opportunity to harvest fireweed last year and just break open those stems and pull out that mucilage, and it's really very slimy. They didn't like doing it because it took too long. So I made them do extra, because that's the kind of teacher I am. Because I tell them it's up to you to do this wild crafting, right? You're not going to find fireweed mucilage in Superdrug or on the, you know, aisle 13 at, you know, Yolks or whatever. This is work that needs to be done. And it's just, mucilage is a polysaccharide, and polysaccharides tend to soothe irritated tissues, heal up tissue that's been damaged, like tendons and ligaments. Also cooling down burns, helping with rashes and that sort of thing. Polysaccharides can also boost the immune system. So fireweed, we don't think about it normally as an herb to take regularly to help our immune systems to stay strong, but it certainly is. So the leaves can be fermented for tea called Ivan chai, and it's just so wonderful to do. And I don't have enough time to really tell you how to do it, but if you join one of my apprenticeship programs, you'll be able to do it. And yeah, and that's all I can say in the time allotted. How much time am I allotted? Just go for it. Because people tend to tell me I open up my mouth and it's a fire hose of information. So if I see heads starting to roll back, I'll know it's time to wrap up. So moving on to St. John's wort, Hypericum perforatum. One of my favorite plants. It is deemed invasive by many. And do you know why? Because it is. Well, I got a story for you. Fireweed in Oregon is called Klamath weed. And the ranchers down there, the sheep ranchers and the cattle ranchers, they were not practicing sustainable ranching practices. And so their, what do you call that? Their pastures, their grazing areas were devastated by the multitude of animals that they had on them. St. John's wort, being a pioneer plant, wants to spread out and will if it can, but it won't if it can't. It tends to normalize itself in an area that has a variety of plants growing in it. So instead of what these ranchers and livestock personnel did was import a beetle from Japan that ate the fireweed, but did not have any kind of predators here in the US. And so, oh gosh. And so then there were all of these beetles that ate all of the of the St. John's wort, and the herbalists were kind of up in arms because they were doing a really, really good job, right, of eating. And then they started taking over and eating all the other plants, right? And so I kind of have this protective kind of mothering thing for St. John's wort. And if I see those beetles, which I will here in North Idaho, I grab their little bodies and I give them a squish or things. They're really cute though. They look like a ladybug, but they're a dark green, like a blackish green that shimmers. Oh gosh, they're so beautiful. But they really devastate the St. John's wort. And why do we care about the St. John's wort? Because it's used traditionally as an antidepressant. And it's also an anodyne and nerve healer. Anodyne means pain reliever. So if we get, I don't want to call it tennis elbow, I call it gardening elbow or shoulder, because we're out there and we're digging and digging. St. John's wort oil, which is a brilliant red because of the hypericin in it, will help to repair those nerves and then bring down inflammation as well to help overall healing and take away the pain as well. And the flower remedy is used to recover lost memories. So sometimes when we've been dealt with some trauma in our lives, we can have blank periods in our life. Oh, I don't remember when I was 12, right? Or you say, there's just parts of my life that I just blanked out. And our minds will do that just to survive what may have happened to us, right? But in that time, there may very well have been a lot of good memories that we block out as well, because our bodies and our minds aren't just blocking out the bad, but they're blocking out everything. So the flower remedy helps us to recover some of the good memories. Flower remedies are just so easy to make and so useful for helping us to heal emotionally. They do help with bodily issues as well due to stress and anxiety and that sort of thing. I remember the first time I made a St. John's wort flower remedy. I had a group of students in Western Washington, way up near Mount Baker, up into the hills. And we made just one big flower remedy. And so when the process was done and the flowers were out, I had one of my apprentices pour from the big bowl into a tiny little bottle with a little opening. And I said, okay, don't get it on me because I really don't know what this does yet. And I was teaching and I didn't want to go off on some trip and not come back, from the top of the mountain. And so as it happens. And so as he was pouring, some of it got on me and I said, okay, well, here we go. What's going to happen? And about 30 seconds later, I felt this whoosh of energy go through me. And I remember this little blue candy that tasted like wintergreen, a blue clear candy that my grandma used to give me. And I thought, you know what? I have not thought about that candy in 40 years. And I went back 40 years and I went, oh, that's what was going on 40 years ago. And I got some healing out of that. It's just so beautiful. So again, this is a plant that most people go, St. John's wort, get it out of your yard. And for me, I say it can bring back so much beauty back into your lives that you may have lost. It's all perspective, isn't it? So alder, Ulmus rubra. Have you noticed the alder catkins? They're lengthening, just like in this picture. And if you thwack them with your finger, the pollen comes out. Oh, yay, it's spring. We made it. That you're all sitting here, congratulations. You made it through winter. Yeah. I'm so thrilled. I'm so thrilled to see those alder catkins. These catkins you can cook and eat. They're super high in protein. That pollen is high in protein. So you can just cut them off. They're bitter, 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 which not everybody likes that taste profile, but it's so great for getting your digestive juices working and everything moving the way it's supposed to, and to help as an anti-inflammatory as well. Bitter herbs are just absolutely amazing for us. And so we can take them and do an egg wash, egg and milk, or egg and coconut milk, dip them in there, dip them in nutritional yeast, and then pan fry them, and ooh la la, they're so tasty. And it's just a wonderful thing to do with a wild plant. And you can impress your friends and neighbors and say, we're gonna have some wild food to eat today. So alder used to be called junk wood from the foresters because there was, nothing to do with them, right? They're not prized for their value. But then all of a sudden, furniture makers went, ooh, alder, so pretty, makes beautiful beds and chairs and tables and things. So all of a sudden, alder became prized again. The strobials in this picture here on the right, you can see me picking some of the strobials. That's the alder cone. And when it's mature but green, super bitter. You can't get much more bitter than that. It kills and expels parasites from y'all and your chickens and your goats and whoever else might have parasites. And on my website, cedarmountainherbs.com, you can go to my articles page and then search for chicken parasites, and I give you the formula and how to make that. It works very, very well. Okay, moving along to mullein. I'm sure you all do. It grows everywhere here. It's really much hated by the common people, but those in the know, especially the herbalists and the people in the Native Plant Society, I'm giving you all grace, because if you don't love it now, you're going to love it in another minute or so. It's used traditionally to open up breathing passages. And there was a lot going around this winter, colds and flus and respiratory stuff, and that one C word too that we don't really need to mention much, right? But it kind of left a lot of people with a lot of congestion and the elephant on the chest and all of that. And what mullein does is it opens up the bronchia so that we can get out all the junk that's in there and get the elephant off the chest. The thing with mullein is that some of the constituents, some of the chemicals in the plant are water soluble and some are alcohol soluble, right? And so if you want the full complement of this lung opening herb that really helped, I got COVID, I don't know when this was, sometime this winter, and I sailed through it in 6 days because I was using my mullein tincture and some other tinctures as well. And it really helped to take that pressure off of my chest and kept me breathing and happy. And, I got to lay in bed for a day, not that I needed to, but I wanted to watch 147 movies on Netflix. So I convinced my husband that I was sicker than I wanted to. And he said it for himself for a day. It was awesome. It was awesome. So I'll use the whole plant. So I pull a whole mullein out, which is wonderful because that's one less mullein, right, in your yard.
So do you try?
I'll get there. All mysteries will be revealed. All mysteries will be revealed. So I take the whole plant and I don't do much washing, but I use a vegetable brush to get off the bulk of the dust if they're on the leaves and the dirt. It's so dry here, right? You just brush it off, it's fine. Extra minerals. And I chop everything up. So the roots, you can't use a knife, you have to use clippers. It's pretty formidable. And then also the leaves and the stems, flowers, and I pack 2 jars. One, I put in 151 proof vodka, because that is 75% alcohol, 25% water. The other one, I can put in 80 or 100 proof vodka, because that is either 60 or 50% water. And so I'm making 2 tinctures. The water soluble constituents go in that 80, 100 or 100 proof vodka jar. The alcohol soluble constituents go in the 151 proof. And I wait a couple weeks, drain them both out, and then I put them all both together, and then I have that full complement of healing. And you can see how tall and straight that plant is. It's used. If we look at the Doctrine of Signatures, the Doctrine of Signatures says that what a plant looks like, maybe if it's erect or it's low growing or maybe spots on the leaves, it's going to tell you about the part of the body or the disease that it'll help to heal, right? So the tall, straight back tells us that it's going to help with all kinds of back pain as well. So we can dry the leaves. If you're going to dry the leaves, dry the stalk as well, right? And then even the roots, and then you can use that as tea, although you're not going to get you're only going to get the water soluble constituents.
So it's the fresh plant that you put.
Yes, I almost always use fresh plants in my tinctures. So years ago, believe it or not, I lived in a school bus. I did say I was a hippie, didn't I? So to prove it, I don't have pictures here, but I lived in a school bus for several years, and I heated with wood stove about halfway down the bus. And one day I harvested some mullein leaves and I wanted to dry them. So I took a needle and thread and just put it through the leaves, and I hung it around the back part. We had stainless steel backing to, keep the bus from burning up, and had the wood stove going. And I walked from the front of the bus to the back, and all of a sudden the scent that was so sweet and so beautiful came out. I just stopped and I just breathed and breathed, and I looked, I said, what is that? And I looked, and it was the mullein, just very gently drying. It was just so beautiful, and I've never been able to duplicate that in a dehydrator. So I have that memory of just that beautiful scent. And we use the flowers to help condition our lungs and strengthen our lungs in response or getting ready for the winter colds and flus, right? So we're just going to pick those flowers, and they go up the stalk, up the flowering stalk like that. So we just pick them, put them in our jar. You can use 80 proof, whatever you want, from vodka. You can even use wine if you want, and you just keep adding the flowers to them till you have your jar as full as you want, with the alcohol already in there. And then after 2 weeks after your jar is full, then you can strain it out, and it's like an aperitif at night. And then you just take some little sips, and that really conditions and heals and strengthens your lungs in preparation for what's to come. And then I like making tea torches out of the mullein. So I just cut the mullein off at the base, and I strip off the leaves, and I dip the tops, the flowering tops, in beeswax or soy wax, and then you set them out in buckets full of sand, and you light it, And it takes about an hour, depending on how tall the flowering stalk is, an hour to 2 hours of a tiki torch, and that's pretty cool. I learned about that at the barter fair in Okanagan about 147 years ago. Anybody ever? Oh, you did? Awesome. I see you. Okay, Canada thistle, AKA spawn of the devil. People think because I'm an herbalist, I love every plant. Au contraire, mon frere. This is one that is in our X garden on the other side of our property. And it came up and it came up and it came up. And we thought we're just gonna pull it out, and we get about, a good 6 inches to a foot of root. And we thought, good, we're done. And the Canada thistle went, hold my beer, watch me. And it would come right back up. And it turns out that these roots will go down and laterally 15, 20 feet or more. So once you got them, you got them. And I am not a fan of Roundup, so I don't do the Roundup. Goats love it, right? So you can, your goats, if you have goats, they'll eat it. What, is there anything good about it? Well, there's lots of tannins and phenolic compounds. Phenolic compounds are types of antioxidants. And their tannins kind of are like the bouncers of plant constituent world. And if I'm a tannin and Preston is maybe a sugar, or because he's so sweet. My goodness. All right, that's what we'll go with. I'm gonna come up to Preston and I'm gonna grab a hold of him and say, you're out of here, man. You're no good in this body, right? So it'll do that with bacteria, viruses, funguses. It'll do that with free radicals, which I would like to change the name of because I'm kind of a free radical and I think I'm on the good side. But free radicals tend to be not so good. They can change cells from healthy cells into cancer cells. So we want to get them out. And the tannins in Canada thistle are capable of doing that. So one check in the pro side for Canada thistles. So that's all I got to say about that one. It's one of those plants that, you try to love. And years ago, I went to an herb walk and the gal, for every plant, she kept saying, well, you can eat the shoots when they're small. And you can just peel off the outer part where all the stickers are. And it's real juicy at first, but then those tannins dry out your mouth. And so your bodily response of tannins, grabbing, if I grab a hold of sugary Preston, grabbing a hold of them is one thing, but I got to get them out. So tannins make you eat. So you're chewing on all these fresh Canada thistles, and then 2 seconds later, you're looking for a lavatory. Pansy, Tanacetum vulgare. Another plant that causes grumbles around you all, right? Because it is everywhere. It is highly invasive. It's in the Asteraceae family. I love this plant within reason, but it can be very greedy. I use it in my Quit Bugging Me spray. So I'll take this plant. You can do it before flower or while it's in flower. Chop the whole thing up fresh. Make a tincture with rubbing alcohol. Or you can use 100 proof or 151, whatever you want. And let it go for 2 weeks and take it out and add some essential oils that the bugs don't like, so mosquitoes and the ticks. And what would that be? Peppermint, cinnamon, patchouli, if you can stand it. Patchouli is love it or hate it. I'm a love it. I didn't wear it today because I wanted you all to love me. How's it going? And what else? You can put any of your citruses and your rosemary and that sort of thing. So if you have, say, 4 ounce tansy tincture, you can put, I put up to a ½ ounce of essential oils, and you shake that up real good, put it in your spray bottles, and you spray everybody, and it really does a good job of keeping the bugs away. And let me tell you, my premises, remember last year, y'all were picking ticks off of me left and right, and they were in my hair and on my back. And so we need to have something that'll help keep that away. And mosquitoes here are horrible. Guess when they start? Next month. So May and June. So it's, yeah, ticks, yeah. You've seen ticks too? Oh, yeah. And I've already seen a mosquito. I smacked a mosquito off of a person. So used in the Middle Ages, this plant was used as an emmenagogue to, get a baby out, an unwanted baby. The problem with that is internal use of tansy can cause liver damage, right? And so back in the 70s, when, the women were really trying to take back their bodies any way they could, they found that the tansy worked really well. But then there were women who said, well, the tansy didn't work, so that must mean I'm supposed to have this baby. And then the baby was born with problems, liver problems. So, because it takes a high concentration for it to work for, quite a while. So we want to be very careful. These herbs are really strong. I was having a conversation with someone the other day who was saying herbs are so gentle. And I said, I don't know what you've been using, but herbs, every last one of them are strong, right? Whether strong medicinally or strong nutritively. So we have to be careful with how we use them. And I can't teach you everything I know in this 1 hour or so that I have with you. So that's why I suggest coming to my classes, even my apprenticeship programs, because I go pretty deep in the time that I have. Desert sage, Artemisia tridentata, one of my favorite plants, but it is native, but it can be invasive again because of poor pasture management or grazing area management. I know there's a term for that. I can't remember it. So this is the plant, another plant in the Asteraceae family. What I love about this plant, who has gone sage picking? And what happens after a while, after you're picking that sage and you're smelling it, what happens? What? You feel good, you get kind of mellow, and everything is just pretty rosy and groovy, right? And that's because the leaves contain two chemicals. One is called alpha-pinene, which is a tranquilizer. And the other one is beta-pinene, which is a sedative, another yay. So we're out there feeling good because we're really mellow, right? And it's on the leaves, so as we're picking, and maybe we're just kind of petting it a little bit, it smells really good. These are monoterpenes. Terpenes are essential oils, the individual chemicals that become, and essential oil is really a compound of up to 300 or more different terpenes in them. And so those two in particular are just so wonderful. It's one of the reasons I love that plant. Now, why would a plant need to have a tranquilizer in it? Because I'm not a person to say all plants everywhere are just for my use, right? I don't think so. Well, plants themselves have their own defense systems and their own immune systems. And these two monoterpenes are part of the plant's defense system, right? Because if I'm a bug and I'm chewing on the desert sage and yum, I love the taste of this. It's so high in protein and this is so good. And if left alone, I could just eat just the desert sage and then there won't be any more. But all of a sudden I get really tired and I fall off the leaf and I take a nap and then I wake up with the munchies and I go somewhere else because I can't just sleep all day because I am an A-type personality and I need to get stuff done. So I'm going to go somewhere else to get something to eat. It's pretty amazing. And as I said, this plant is higher in protein, and it's higher in protein during the fall, winter, and spring than it is in the summer, because it is a grazing, a foraging plant for all the birds that live in this area. We don't have desert sage right here, but you go west of Spokane and you'll find it. I'm not telling you where, but I'll take you there if you sign up for my class. Oxeye daisy. People love this plant. I don't know why they see it as an invasive plant. It's one of my favorite plants. When we see oxeye daisy in flower, we're going to see the foxglove in flower too. And I don't have enough time to go on about foxglove. We have to be careful. Foxglove does contain digitalin, which is where originally digitalis was made from, which gives us humans strong, steady heartbeats. We have a very specific dose that we take of the digitalin, but we don't know what that dose is if we're just going to be chewing on the foxglove leaf, right? So we have to be very careful with that. But for me, when I see the oxeye daisy, I know that the foxglove, these are two of my favorite wildflowers. I just adore them together. The leaves taste sweet, and you can put them in your salads, on your sandwiches. You can dry them and make a tea. Traditionally used to relieve muscle spasms. I know my younger apprentices will tincture this up or make an oil and rub it on their bellies when they're having their menstrual cramps, and they say it works really well. And the whole plant is astringent. We can take that whole plant, chop it up, put it in a jar, and let it pour witch hazel over it, just plain witch hazel, and let it sit for about 3 weeks. Strain it out, and then we pat and pat, and it firms our skin. It takes away zits and heals wounds because it contains a lot of tannins too. It's just a beautiful plant. And I remember years and years ago, gosh, this was back in the early 90s, I had an apprentice who didn't like bitter plants. And the way I figured that out is at the first day of her apprenticeship with me, I took her on a plant walk, and I was having her taste certain plants. Now, when you're with me, I will never have you taste a plant that I don't know myself to be safe. We're not just out there grazing on whatever, because that's very unethical and irresponsible. I know my plants very well. And if I don't know it, I say, don't eat it. Don't even touch it until we figure it out. So I was having her eat these different plants, and a lot of them were bitter. And she's like, ew, I don't like bitter. She was really super young and, you know, had her eyelashes and everything. And every time she would say, ooh, I'd go, oh, all right, what's our next bitter plant that I can have her eat? And I told her about the oxeye daisy. I said, chew on one of these leaves. And she did. She went, oh, I like that. That tastes sweet. So I didn't think too much of it. We just moved along, and then all of a sudden she was willing to eat bitter plants. And I thought, oh my gosh, her body has recognized bitter is good, and her body instantaneously, it's a miracle, is loving the bitter. Well, at the end of her apprenticeship, she said, well, you know what happened? I stuck a bunch of those oxeye daisy leaves in my pocket, and every time you had me eat something bitter, I ate one of the leaves of the oxeye daisy. So she got me. But then she also said she learned how that bitter is really good for her, and she started eating more bitter. So I think we both won that one. Now, I would really be remiss if I didn't talk about kinnikinnick here in this gathering today. Arctostaphylos uva ursi. Sometimes we just call it uva ursi. Sometimes we call it bearberry. It's in the Ericaceae family. The Ericaceae family will also bring you Madrona from the coast and Manzanita down in California. It contains arbutin, which is a glycoside. Glycosides are part of the plant's immune system, defense system, and they could be very strong to poisonous, right? So depending on the alkaloid. Like the glycoside is an alkaloid. So this arbutin, though, is one that will change in our body into hydroquinone, which is antimicrobial. And so people use this kinnikinnick or uva ursi to help when a person has a urinary tract infection, because it really does a great job to kill the E. coli that could be in the urinary tract or whatever. It's normally the E. coli in the urinary tract that's causing the bladder infection, but it's not always that way. But it works best if we pair it up with something that's alkaline. And so that's why when people say UTIs, people will tell you to drink cranberry juice. Well, it's no good to drink cranberry juice with sugar on it, because that bacteria goes, sugar, Preston, my friend, and will just make more of itself. So it has to be the plain cranberry juice, and it turns the body alkaline. So the alkaline and the hydroquinone that the kinnikinnick provides for us will help to kill and expel that bacteria. So very, very high in tannins, very high. And so because of that reason, we're not going to be using this particular plant for more than 2 to 3 days, or it can cause kidney and stomach dysfunction, and it could be very irritating to the kidneys. And we're already having issues there, right? So we want to just be careful with that. And that's a whole subject, you know, UTIs are a whole different subject. So we can dry the kinnikinnick or make a fresh plant tincture, put it in a sitz baths. You know what a sitz bath is? You put it in your bath and you sits in it, right? And it helps with all kinds of lady bits and man part issues. Man part issues can be, what do you call that? I have my own word for it, and it's not very nice, so I'm not going to say it. That fungus, what is that? That guys get? Jock itch, right? It's going to help heal up the jock itch because it's very drying. The tannins are very drying. And then for women, for yeast infections and vaginosis, really great for, excuse me, after a woman gives birth, but we want to wait 24 hours, and it helps to tighten up that tissue really, really well. And it grows everywhere here. So just a few of our garden weeds. People call them weeds: chickweed, lamb's quarters, purslane, very high in nutrients. We can eat them all. The chickweed, I love the chickweed, Stellaria media. If you take one of the stems and break it open, it's like a little rubber band in there. Years ago, like 143 years ago, this gal called me up. She said, your mother gave me your phone number. My mom always did that. I was living in Seattle at the time and living up on Capitol Hill. And she said, I've got something wrong with my eye. I have a sty in my eye. I've been to the doctor. He wants to lance it. I don't want to deal with that. And my whole body is shaking. What can we do? And I said, well, do you have any chickweed? She said, if I do, I don't know. I said, okay, I'll make a house call. So at the bottom of my apartment building, there was a lot of chickweed. So I gathered some up and I drove to her house and noticed she had chickweed growing right outside in her side yard. And, you know, our plants really do grow where they're needed. If we start to notice who they are, right, the medicine, nutrition they provide, we can really see why they're, and then what's going on with us or our loved ones or maybe our clients. You know, we'll see that they match up. So I went inside and we juiced up that chickweed. I put it on a rag, put it on her eye. And I said, when it starts heating up, then we're going to change it out with a fresh rag, right? Because it's pulling out the infection. And her eye was like this. It was closed and it was all puffy. And I could tell she was shaky too. I also brought her some echinacea tincture. So I told her to start taking that once, a dropper every hour. So while I was there, she had 2 applications of the chickweed, and I didn't want to do it all for her. I wanted to empower her to learn how to do it herself. So after she was starting to feel a little better, even just as I was there, her eyes started opening. And I showed her what the chickweed looked like, where it was, and she was able to harvest it herself. I said, give me a call in a couple of days and tell me what's happening. And I didn't hear from her. But somebody alerted to me. In the Seattle Times, they had this section called Rant and Rave. And there was a rave about me helping this gal to cure herself of the sty in her eye. And in the same week, I got a card from her, and she said, by the next day, it was all open and it was draining and she wasn't all shaky anymore. And then she ended up getting another sty in the other eye about a week later, and she used the chickweed and she said in 2 days, it was like it never happened. Right? So wonderful. Such a very cooling plant. And one of my favorite ways to use the chickweed is to chop it up and put it in your burritos. So good, so healthy, very cooling too. So cools fevers and hot flashes. The lamb's quarters, Chenopodium album. There is a plant that you all may have eaten, the seed quinoa, right? Quinoa, Chenopodium quinoa, very high in protein. The Chenopodium album, lamb's quarters, is also very high in protein. In fact, it's about 85% protein. And it's interesting what common names are. I had sheep years ago, and the sheep and the lambs loved eating the lamb's quarters. Cool. My chickens loved eating the chickweed. Very cool. I love that. And then the purslane, we have that everywhere, don't we, in our gardens? And it's sour, high in antioxidants, especially vitamin C. Very, very tasty. So I wanted to thank you all for letting me spend some time with you today. Again, I didn't teach you everything I know about these plants in that tiny little area, or time that I had. So go on my website, cedarmountainherbs.com. I have all kinds of one-day classes coming up. For the spring, I haven't put in my fall classes yet. People don't tend to do many herb classes in the summer because I think everybody's outside. But I am in July 15th, I believe, I'm going to be doing a hugelkultur and straw bale garden class. And so that's very hands-on. It's going to be 9 to 3, and there's going to be snacks and herbal iced teas. And we're going to install a couple of guilds and a couple of straw bales, start to finish. So that's going to be a lot of fun. My Roots to Tips apprenticeship program starts at the end of this month. There are a couple of openings for that. I go very deep into the herbs. And then I have a Thursday apprenticeship starting next month, every Thursday for 16 weeks with a couple of breaks in between. But there's only 1 or 2 spaces available for that. I have stickers and cards here. You're welcome to one sticker per person, please. They're pricey. One's really cool on your water bottle. Thank you. And I think that's it. Thank you all. Oh, questions. Thank you. Bye.